The giant then tells Cooper that he forgot something, which seems to refer to Audrey's note laying on the floor next to the bed. After Coop asks what, a golden orb, brilliant like the sun, materializes and then appears to enter Cooper's body. This object resembles the many orbs used in Season 3 and seems to indicate some relationship between the realm of the living and the divine spark or the light of higher conscious awareness. Remember that it seems as if Agent Cooper briefly crossed over to the other side after being shot, so he's had this he's had his conscious awareness already expanded. Perhaps the giant is returning a soul essence to Cooper when he passed over for a brief time after being shot. Remember, the giant indicates in their first meeting that Cooper indeed went somewhere else. And don't forget, in that scene, just before the giant appears, we see Audrey Horne calling out to Agent Cooper, praying that he will soon find her note and come to her rescue. The giant seems to embody a force of light in the world, appearing when others are in desperate need of help. The light transferred into Cooper's body may also be interpreted as the Golden Light Sutra, a sacred text in Mahayana Buddhism. Now, to me, I couldn't help, with the giant in the room and the golden orb, I could not help but think of some very strong unconscious and thematic similarities from that scene in Twin Peaks to the movie Communion, which came out in 1989, starring Christopher Walken. Now, the film Communion is based on a true story as recounted by science fiction author Whitley Strieber, who says he was visited by some sort of entities of unknown origins over the course of many years. It's a series of unexplained events which Whitley recounts as happening at the family cabin tucked deep in the woods of upstate New York. Now, the film itself was a flop at the box office. The scenes of the supernatural or alien encounters Strieber had were considered quite laughable in their execution. Now, despite all of its flaws, the film succeeds in one important area for those who can watch it with an open mind. It's also important to know, and I'll get into what that significant area is. Now, it's also important to note that the encounters in Communion, in at least in the book, were supposed to be more ambiguous and open and less focused on aliens as the source of Strieber's visitations. At least that is how it was originally recounted in Strieber's book. Only later, after some hypnosis sessions with renowned ufologist Bud Hopkins, were these entities thought of as aliens or extraterrestrials. Now, Communion involves some very surreal and transcendent themes, which in a very Lynchian way plays with the notion of meaning versus meaninglessness. So this is kind of the gold that I derived out of this movie Communion. Communion explores how we as humans grapple with living in a world where we simply cannot explain everything that we experience. And there's, of course, a lot of parallels with Twin Peaks in that sentiment. Now, at the end of the movie, Walken's character enters this other world of the aliens or supernatural entities, where he confronts a doppelganger of himself and his wife, which are pictured in the center lower portion of the screen here. The doppelganger of himself tells him to pay attention and that he has something important to show him. To which Walken's character, in his quest for meaning, replies, "That's all there is? No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. That can't be. That can't be so." as he discovers in this scene that there's no meaning to be found at all in his final confrontation or in his interactions with these beings. So a little later in the film, Walken's wife, played by Lindsay Krause, they're at this art gallery, and she affirms this theme for her husband by telling him that not everything has to mean something in the first place. And it's so appropriate that they're in a beautiful art gallery. It's just wonderful. To which Walken's character appears to have a burden suddenly lifted from his shoulders. It's a very transcendent film that is worth considering despite its quirkiness and the goofiness of some of the alien characters. If you can excuse that, it really is a fantastic movie. Now, also with the communion theme for a moment, this scene from season 2, episode 10, where Major Briggs is abducted during their camping trip, strongly reminds me of communion as well. And on an unrelated note, there seems to be many different eras in film and TV where works containing similar themes all seem to come out around the same time. I guess just word seems to travel fast in Hollywood. Like in 1999, for example, there were 4 very important films that all came out around the same time in the same year that explored the nature of simulated realities and their effects on the human psyche, all of which are very good films in their own right. One of them is incredibly obvious, but the others I'll let you figure out on your own, but they're all well worth your time, so I just wanted to mention that. Now, moving on to episode 2 of the second season, and we're going to, like I said, season 2 has a lot of controversy for fans of the show, but season 2 is also directed by David Lynch, so we're going to go with this one. We have this creepy sort of Harold and Maude duo here of grandma and her creepy grandson, who is an aspiring magician, and the act of the disappearing creamed corn, the Garmin Bozia. So from Cooper's dream, early in the first season, we know that the magician longs to see. That's what we're told in this soliloquy. There is most certainly a supernatural connection with these two characters, as well as with the Garmin Bozia or creamed corn, which is commensurate with human pain and suffering. Now, the magician says to Donna, "J'ai une âme solitaire," translated from French meaning, "I have a lonely soul." He is speaking to Donna as the pain and suffering experienced by their neighbor, Harold Smith, and I'll show that a little bit later. Remember, these spirits, such as Mrs. Tremond, her grandson, Bob, and all the rest, in varying degrees, are feeding on pain and suffering at different levels. However, pain and suffering manifest differently for the various mortal characters in Twin Peaks. So each will have their own, patron demon of pain and suffering, as it were. So even though the common element to each character's suffering most certainly seems to involve isolation as a key element. So a little later in this video, I'm going to return to this idea and tie it all together in a way which will be very clear in terms of the symbolism used and where it appears to have come from in the first place. Again, this is just my own take on Twin Peaks. I don't make silly claims that art like this has to be just has to have one objective meaning. That would defile the entire work in my estimation. Nor would I ever try to lend my own sort of post facto projections onto someone else's heartfelt and painstaking efforts. So I just want to put that out there, because what I'm about to talk about a little bit later is going to be something that I interpret alone. Now, Donna asks Mrs. Tremond if she knew Laura Palmer well, to which the old woman hesitates. She's looking around, Go back and watch that scene. And then she says, "No. Unlike Mike, who severed his arm in order to completely disown his relationship with the devilish one, Mrs. Tremond and her familiar, or perhaps it is the other way around, are playing a different role here." We will talk more about this familiar and demon business later on. Also, like I said before, this business of the isolated soul is a very important theme in Twin Peaks, and we will look into this as well.